You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you in further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean pulls you to enter into deeper waters.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I am your host, Nick Peters. We seem to be experiencing some technical delays here of some sort. I'm not the computer guy, so I don't really know what's going on, but I hope that it's coming out clearly on your end, everything's going to work out okay. And if you've been watching the blog this week, you've probably been noticing there hasn't been any activity. Yes, I'm still here, I'm still alive and well. We went to visit my in-laws this week, had a great time, ended up this Friday night coming back to Knoxville and seeing Lee Strobar here, and oh, what a treat. And yes, we are sometime going to be hoping to have Lee Strobar as our guest on the show. But today, our guest is Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics, and he's going to be here with us to tell us about his ministry and about the Unbelievable conference coming up in the UK later on this month. Kurt, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. So before we start talking, what I usually like to ask my guests here is just tell us a little bit about themselves, and since we're going to be talking about apologetics and such, why should my audience be taking what my guest says seriously?
Yes, well, as you said, my name is Kurt Jaros, and I am the founder and director of a new ministry called Real Clear Apologetics, which seeks to bring and foster good dialogue between various worldviews. I suppose that might even be within Christianity itself, too, people have different views on matters. Mm-hmm. And I am from the Chicago area, and that's where I currently reside. Though I was able to experience some really nice weather in California when I went out to do my undergraduate at Biola, and I stayed on for an extra year to do their excellent MA in Christian apologetics. Mm-hmm. And then I left the nice weather and moved to London for a year, where I had the chance to do an MA in systematic theology at King's College London.
Nice.
And it was there that I could make some connections in the UK, and now I'm thankful that I'll be headed back there in 2 weeks for the Unbelievable conference.
Okay. And for anyone else who's interested, if you're a follower of Deeper Waters, our blogs are usually put up on Real Clear Apologetics also, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And as you said earlier, you said how you've taken a break from blogging for the week. Mm-hmm. And I'm thankful because sometimes you certainly outpaced me in the number of blogs that you post.
Yeah, Kurt had sent me a message and said, hey, I'd like to start putting your blogs up on Real Clear Apologetics. Okay, just put back a link, let people know where it came from, and he didn't realize I usually blog on average once every weekday, so 5 times a week. So.
That's right. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely some excellent material that you've got, and more recently I really enjoyed the post about you're assessing some claims by a Muslim against Michael Icona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that could have had some impact on our last show. We had Nabil Qureshi come on for an hour. Yeah, normally Muslim apologetics just really disappoints me. I've said before, I usually get the feeling with Muslim apologists that they're like these little dogs that go around thinking that they're big dogs, and all the big dogs are just looking and saying, is that all you got?
Yeah. The number one largest problem I have with their methodology is that they presuppose the Quran to be true, and they've got to operate on that notion, and that leads to all sorts of really untenable positions with how we do history and who Jesus is. It's certainly not the way that a scholar would think. So that's one of my biggest problems.
Yeah, I've had some fun getting to catch some Muslims a bit flat-footed when they're talking about all these problems in my Bible, and I say, have you read the Bible? And they'll say, no. Have you read the Quran? And I can come back and say, yep, I've read it. So, you talked about the Unbelievable conference coming up. But my listeners might not know what we're talking about with that, but what is this Unbelievable conference?
Well, the Unbelievable conference, this is the third year that they're doing this, and it was it's hosted and put on and organized by Justin Brierley of Mere Christian Radio. And basically it's, as far as I know, it's the only apologetics conference that is going on in the UK. And so it's every year it's been growing, and we're expecting large numbers this year. The theme of the conference, which is being held on May 25th, is Jesus, liar, lunatic, legend, or Lord. And it's modeled after, and there will be talks on C.S. Lewis, his famous liar, lunatic, or Lord argument. Now we're adding the question of whether or not it's a legend. We've seen with these new atheists coming up saying, well, it's just a legend, it's a myth. Lewis didn't quite have that in his day, so we've added that into the questions. So there will be excellent speakers. Alistair McGrath is one of the world's foremost theologians and apologists. He's going to be headlining the conference and speaking on a number of issues, which would include how do we show the world a reasonable case for Christ, and he'll be talking about C.S. Lewis as a storyteller. He just recently wrote a great biography on Lewis.
Oh yes, so he did an interview with Justin Browley recently of Unbelievable on that.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, so he'll have much to say on that, and we're really excited. And also at the conference will be Amy Orr-Ewing. She works with RZIM or RZIM. And Franz Rana of Reasons to Believe. Peter S. Williams. He's got this great new book out on how C.S. Lewis would respond to the new atheists. And Dr. Trevor Stammers is going to be giving a talk on how Christians should look at the abortion and pro-life issue. So
I'm guessing.
Go ahead.
I'm guessing the way that C.S. Lewis would respond when you atheists would be something other than the obvious laughter at the start.
Yeah.
But keep going back the rest of the conference for us.
Oh well, yeah. So it's a one-day event, and it's going to be held in London. And so, like you said, some of your listeners might not have heard of it, but they can check it out on the web, unbelievable.org, .uk.org, and /Jesus. And yeah, some really good stuff that Justin's doing with his Unbelievable podcast for us. It's a radio show over there, but usually it's, I think, the wee hours for us here in the States.
Yeah, I was actually on his program one time. It was the last Saturday in January of 2010 that my showing on there was aired, but I had to do it earlier in the week. And I'm on Eastern Standard Time. They did it during lunchtime. I got up at 5:30 in the morning so I could be on the show, which added to my idea I like to usually say of we deal with more atheists by 9 a.m. than most people do all day.
Yeah, it's that's the time change for you.
Yeah, but it was definitely worth it. One of the most enjoyable events I've done in apologetics. And I seriously doubt you know about this, but we are trying to get Justin Brierley to do an interview this week that we will be playing back next Saturday to talk about the conference.
Yeah. Yeah, I just spoke with Justin. He just had me on his show. It was just for a 10-minute segment, introducing myself and talking a little bit about what I'll be talking at the conference and my ministry too. He had some questions. So
now, and with this conference, one thing you didn't tell us is what day is it going to be on?
Yes, it's Saturday, the 25th of May. So for those who want to take a vacation, perhaps a weekend trip across the pond, they're welcome to join us. Tickets are, let's see, $29 pounds each, so in dollars that might come out to about $40. But it's well worth it, and if you book 2 tickets, then you get last year's copy of the conference for free. If you book 2 tickets.
Yeah, so if you've got the resources to go, and if you're, for instance, here in America and living across the pond, and you've got the resource, you got the time, then feel free to go. And heck, if you got the resource and you got the time, feel free to consider a donation to Deeper Waters as well. And of course, some of you could be listening in the UK, and if you are listening in the UK, and head on over there to the conference. I've got a really good friend who lives in that area. He's studying at the University of Edinburgh, and I think he went to last year's conference. It's so great that an apologetics conference is going on in the UK. But you said you were over there earlier before, and that's how you came in touch with Justin. What were you doing in the UK earlier?
Yeah, so I was there doing my second MA in systematic theology at King's College London. And I was actually at the very first conference that was put on, and Justin was hosting, and I went to a number of other events that Premier Christian Radio and then Justin put on. Some debates with William Lane Craig when he did his Reasonable Faith tour. And so, yeah, they're doing some really good work over there. England is ripe for a sort of a revival, if you will. And I think it serves as a great opportunity for Christians to learn about what a culture is like without the gospel, what it's like where people hardly even know the basic tenets of Christianity anymore. That is, this is the general population. Whereas here in America, people still have a general idea. You know, they may go to church on Easter and Christmas, but there, you know, people have said Christianity is dead. Thankfully, there are still some churches that are succeeding and doing well and flourishing, spreading the gospel message and working for the kingdom. And apologetics is a key task to that. So, just and Premier Christian Radio are doing good work.
Yeah, just as I'd said in my intro, when we came back to Knoxville from visiting my in-laws, my wife and I went to a local church, one of the mega churches here in Knoxville, and they were hosting an event with Lee Strobel coming and giving the case for Christ. And it gets me so excited. Here's a big, big church paying to have a speaker like Lee Strobel come, and how great it would be to have this happen more often. Of course, I went up to him afterwards and said, look, my services are here. I'm available, because if there's something that I'm really passionate about, it's about getting apologetics into the local church.
Yeah, no, it's definitely important, and in the work that I've done locally here in the suburbs of Chicago, I've experienced some churches that are open and welcoming, and they see the need for apologetics. And I've also seen and witnessed churches who they don't really get it yet, and I think that's probably a mistake, that perhaps in 10, 15, 20 years they might be regretting that decision, or they'll be behind in responding to the needs of the culture and what people are really asking for.
Have you got to speak at any of these churches?
Yeah, I've spoken to youth groups and Sunday school classes, and have been in contact with other groups. So I'm really excited about the prospects for apologetics in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah, maybe your experience is kind of like mine, but for instance, I've got a cousin who's a pastor in Chattanooga, and he heard me speaking at my grandmother's funeral and said, well, we got to get you to come down here and speak at our church. And so I came down and spoke, and I did a good deal of apologetics in my sermon, and I noticed people really liked it, and I could tell they did because we took a love offering after the service, and they were very generous, which is a sure sign they liked what they heard.
Yeah, that's great.
So many people, they can think this stuff is above them and such, that it's not going to do anything, but when it gets into the pulpit, people really get interested. It's like they realize there's a whole new world out there that they never even realized.
Yeah, and it really it tailors the message of Christianity without diluting it to people who have certain questions. I was teaching a Sunday school class, and I had asked some people about some of the ways that they would respond to questions that non-believers might ask, questions pertaining to apologetics.
Yeah.
And one of the gentlemen had said what he would do is say, well, you just got to read the Bible. And sure, this works for some people. Oftentimes for some of us, we read the scriptures and it resonates with us. Even for non-believers, something will click. But that doesn't work for everybody. People will just ignore the person who says, well, you just have to read the Bible, or you just got to believe. So there's something more that needs to be brought up than just read the Bible. So we've got to work on preparing Christians to adequately respond to the questions that non-believers have.
Yeah, as soon as I heard you say that, I started thinking immediately, and what's going to happen when this guy meets up with Bart Ehrman someday?
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, well, at least Bart would convince him that, or talk to him about the existence of Jesus and death on the cross.
Yeah, that's so important, because too many of these Christians, I fear, they get into kind of a fundamentalist thinking about Christianity, and then when they become atheists, they have the exact same methodology with their thinking. It's just their allegiance has changed. And this leads us into this nonsensical approach that Jesus never even existed, which even some of the new atheists have said you can make a reasonable case that Jesus never even existed. And as soon as I see that, I just keep thinking, yeah, this is further proof to me you don't know what you're talking about.
Right, you mean for those people that, are saying Jesus never existed. Yeah. And you've had Gary Habermas on. He would just slam that belief. I mean, this guy, he delves himself into the scholarly material. And it's evident that this is not any sort of view that is part of the general consensus or even respected among scholars. It's clear Jesus existed, and it's clear that Jesus died via crucifixion. So people who say Jesus never existed, they're falling prey to just the popular rhetoric out there that's ungrounded.
Yeah, when we were at this event last night for East October, I was waiting for him because he started talking about the crucifixion of Jesus as his first main fact, and I was waiting for that quote, and it came, the one from John Dominic Crossan about it's as sure as fact of any in ancient history that Jesus Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate. If you can get John Dominic Crossan admitting something that would fit in very well with, and does fit in very well with Orthodox conservative Christianity, it must be something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's important for other people who have recognized that they are willing to affirm those things. You're not very far then from leading them to believe that Jesus was resurrected. All it takes is some explanation and following through and helping them see the methodology and asking them to be consistent in their requirements. So yeah, you're pretty close at that point, I think.
I mean, since we were even talking about Muslim apologetics earlier, if there was one clear reason I have for rejecting the Quran and Muslim belief, it'd be this denial that Jesus was crucified. It's just totally bizarre to me. How can I take something as a divine revelation?
that's precisely what I was talking about earlier, about how they presuppose the Quran. You wouldn't use a 6th or 7th century document to learn about a guy from the 1st century. That's simply not how we do history. Well, that is, if there are no other documents up until that time. But that's not the case. We do have documents that predate various documents. So, yeah, it's just they're doing history poorly when they make certain claims like that. But they have to. They've got to be consistent, or they've got to recognize maybe the Quran is mistaken on some issues.
Yeah, but Kurt, I'm thinking some of my listeners could be saying, "Well, isn't that exactly the same thing you two do with the Bible?"
Yeah. So there's various ways you can approach this. So some people. Some theologians out there and pastors are willing to say that there are errors in the Bible, but they might say something like, but if they never claim that the Bible is inerrant, that they don't have to be approached with that problem, where Muslims typically would say it's errorless in every way to the extreme, exhaustively, even though in terms of the calligraphy, you can go back and see how it's changed. At any rate, but there are other Christians who still want to say, look, no, there's no errors. The authors meant what they said, and this is what we have today. Up to 99.5%. And of course, none of the doctrine is different. So if that's the case, then sometimes it takes a case-by-case looking at these supposed errors and looking to see what the author meant and how he was using literary devices and different ways to interpret. Like in the Old Testament, some Christian theologians have looked at what do we make of the Old Testament, apparently genocide passages. There are some scholars who say this is literal interpretation, and that we aren't in an epistemological position. We don't know why God instructed this, but we know that God grounds morality. It comes from Him and His nature. So we have to say this is permissible. Whereas other theologians might say, like I'm thinking of Paul Copan here, he might say something like this is ancient Near Eastern literary war rhetoric, perhaps, and it's not meant to be taken literally. So there are different theologians who, I think, no matter which side you come down on that issue, they offer various ways of understanding these passages, such that you don't have to, you can take down these obstacles against being a Christian and adopt these views. You don't have to serve as barriers to having faith in Christ.
Well, since you mentioned the genocide, I'll go ahead and tell my listeners that we are working on having some shows on with guests like Heath Thomas, Jeremy Evans, and Paul Copan, and all three of them work together on a volume called Holy War in the Bible, Christian Morality, and an Old Testament Problem. So,
isn't that a more recent book?
Yes, it is. It just came out April 5th.
Yeah, I don't have my copy yet, but I'm interested.
Neither do I, but I think I'm going to be getting one soon so that we can have a good discussion about it on the show. But this should also point out, we were saying that we're not afraid to look into these hard issues and study them. We should be more than willing to take the position of a skeptic of Christianity and just really examine what it is that our book is claiming and checking and seeing if it's true, which is something that I really don't see the Muslim adherents doing.
Yes. It's an interesting point that you brought up. Perhaps because we're willing to say that there are multiple ways to look at this. And perhaps with Islam, Muslims at least don't want to give off that idea, even though there are divisions in their faith as to what the text is saying. Yeah, perhaps they don't want to give off that there are strong divisions. They often do that as an attack against Christianity, that there are so many different divisions. But of course, that doesn't mean that it's not true.
Well, we're talking here with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics, and today's likely to be a discussion discussing general apologetics and such, what Kurt's doing with his ministry. Our number is 714-242-5180 if you'd like to call in and ask your question. And right now, we are just going to take a quick little commercial break, and we will be back after this.
Are you tired of the same old corporate Christian music on the radio? Check out Music Surge on Rock Radio, playing Christian music that doesn't suck. Download episodes now at CYIWorldwide.com.
This is Mike Lacona. Nick Peters is my son-in-law, and I'm excited to announce his new podcast in which Nick will discuss and have guests on topics related to Christian apologetics and dealing with disabilities. Nick has already interviewed apologetic stars such as Greg Koukl and Rob Bowman, and I know of other stars he's in the process of inviting. So be sure to check out Nick's new podcast.
And we are back with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics. Our number is 714-242-5180, and I do have a chat open. I'm going to try and be watching both, so if you have a question, just feel free to put it there, and we'll see if we can get to it that way as well. You know, some of you were talking about with the approach that Christians take that I was thinking about is that a lot of the times the skeptics will come about all these errors and such in the Bible, and I really think it's been a mistake with Christians that we think we have to answer every single error, because then it becomes a stump the Bible scholar game, and if they find one contradiction in there, well, then they don't have to take the whole thing seriously. Now, it is my position that the Bible is inerrant, but it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm out there just wanting to prove the resurrection. I don't want to have to prove inerrancy first. I think that'd be a very impossible task to do. I'm more interested in just proving the resurrection. Would that be your approach too?
Yes, although it is good to have a good discussion on the doctrine of inerrancy, and that will be the theme of the Evangelical Philosophical Society conference in November. But yeah, I mean, when you're doing apologetics, and certainly it's good to maybe address a couple if someone's curious, but like you said, it can quickly turn into a game of stump the Bible scholar, and that's, you can tell that it no longer becomes an issue of intellectual concern. Especially because a lot of people have trouble distinguishing between inerrancy and reliability. Something needs not be inerrant for it to be reliable. In fact, plenty of testimony that we use in court isn't inerrant, but it's reliable. So this doctrine, I don't think, needs to set itself up against the case for Christ. And like I was saying, for some people, if they want to try and stump the Bible scholar, you can tell that this is no longer an intellectual issue. It's most likely more of an emotional issue. There's something else going on. And we've got to be discerning and gentle in our assessment there. Because even for people that it is more of an issue, they don't want to be told that it's just an emotional issue.
And yet, at the same time, if we were speaking at a church somewhere to an audience of Christians and doing a sermon, for instance, on a certain passage, I think it would be beneficial to us all that, while we're not out there to defend inerrancy, but if there is some noted Bible contradiction that's in the text, that we should take the time from our sermon to explain why this isn't a contradiction, to give a fuller background to the text.
Yes, I would agree. Like I was saying, these can be more in-house discussions, and it's important for some people to begin learning about how to reconcile certain passages together and how to understand them properly. And additionally, I mean, there's there's books out there devoted to just this.
Yeah.
Norman Geisler has written When Critics Ask. That's one that I own. Or When Skeptics Ask. There's other ones out there like Demolishing Supposed Bible Contradictions. So there's plenty out there that people can, if they're really sincerely interested to learn about all these various different supposed contradictions, that there's resources for them, and they can take the time to do that instead of playing Stump the Bible Scholar.
And I'm also thinking another great resource is my ministry partner's website, tectonics.org, TEKTONICS, where he's got the encyclopedia of Bible verses that he's put together with several supposed contradictions, which, whenever I'm looking for them, that's my first place I go to, actually, for dealing with Bible contradictions.
Yeah, Tectonics has a great website, good articles, logical thinking. He provides, of course, the logical alternatives to issues with remaining consistent with the text. Yeah, I agree. It's a good website, good resource.
The problem is, something that Lee talked about last night, is that our culture is by and large biblically illiterate. I mean, I can understand the skeptics not knowing how to deal with the Bible, but Christians don't know how to handle a Bible where either. That's why, for instance, in our debates going on marriage in our country today, so many people think it's an argument to go up and say, well, it also says you shouldn't have tattoos and you shouldn't eat shellfish. And myself, knowing how to interpret text, I look at it and think, you have to be kidding. But your average Christian is sitting there and they're stumped. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, and that's what some of us call picking and choosing, right? Where you come across a text and you say, well, it must mean that. And, that's what I used to do with other issues when I was in middle school. And we've got to learn to grow our intellect, to give people the benefit of the doubt, too. Allow them to explain and to be winsome in addressing these issues. I think that, if I were an atheist or something like that, if I were an atheist, I would still want to try and be winsome to win over the Christians. But that's not what happens. They come across as hateful and oftentimes, in my experience, uncivil, not even respecting others' views. And that's, from a practical standpoint, that's not advantageous. So.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time debating the marriage issue, and there is some reason a lot of atheists have jumped on this bandwagon, and I honestly think a lot of it is that the homosexual activists oppose the Christian stance on this, and it's kind of, to me, like atheists want to, by and large, seem to go against anything that has anything to do with Christianity whatsoever, so this one's jumped on, and I find it so amazing that the venom that gets spewed out in my way from my stance is given at the same time by telling me I should be more tolerant. And I'm just thinking that this side has spent so much time talking about tolerance, you think they'd be practicing this gospel that they're teaching.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that, that they're often intolerant toward those that disagree with them. And, I'm with you on this issue. Oftentimes when people say we've got to be tolerant, why think that? What moral grounding is there on their view for us to be tolerant? And Christians, we have a good explanation. What I would say, I would use the abductive argument for, the best explanation for morals and how we can ground them. Whereas, religious pluralists, subjectivists, moral relativists, atheists, they don't have as good of explanations for how morality exists and why we ought to live this way. So,
care to give us that abductive argument and explain why you call it an abductive argument?
Yeah, so an abductive argument is it's something that's pretty much just what is the best explanation various fields use abductive reasoning, including science, believe it or not. And it's just the argument with the best explanation, the best explanatory power, scope, very similar to like the historical method, certain criteria we would use for determining what the best explanation is. So, on Christianity, I think we have a very good explanation for how morality exists and why we ought to function a certain way. Whereas more naturalistic attempts to ground morality, they ultimately fail because they're, I think, and they're problematic because they're either left up to the individual or they're left up to society, right? And this doesn't so much as provide an ought. Why ought I agree or behave that way? So they're not mind independent, they're mind contingent, and that's problematic, I think.
Yeah, I find that so many of them also, and it's the same critique I have of a lot of Christians who make the more argument for Christianity, is that very rarely are these terms defined. You have terms like good and evil thrown around, and no one ever defines them. And it's my sense that good and evil, they're not physical traits. So you're not going to find what they are on a basis that's rooted in materialism. You need a metaphysical basis for good and evil. And yet metaphysics is usually thrown out ipso facto by atheists that I meet, which is interesting since very few of them can even define what metaphysics is.
Yeah. This morning I got into a discussion online with a gentleman who was arguing with someone saying that the doctrine of hell is a scare tactic used by Christians, and that because it's a scare tactic, therefore it's wrong, it's immoral. And so I joined the conversation, and I asked him, because he's I would call him a naturalist, that how can the naturalist make a claim on morality? Why ought not Christians use that doctrine? And what makes scaring people wrong? And so his best attempt was to explain that it's merely a byproduct of evolution, and that today in Western civilization we all agree that, say, like murdering people is wrong, and so this is just the general consensus. But that doesn't actually address my question. What makes it true that scaring people is wrong? So on his view, it's just because we agree that way, and that's the way we live. But that doesn't tell me why. It doesn't ground it. And ultimately, he had to say that, on his view, he doesn't assess ethical questions as true or false. So there, he really hit the nail on the head and confirmed what Christians say regarding those explanations. That there's difficulty in saying that it's true. It's just preference, societal preference. It's the way we evolve. But we can't have assurance that it's true. So, again, like I was saying, I think that's problematic, and I think Christianity has a better explanation, and that lends to its credibility.
Something fascinating about the world of apologetics, and I was listening to what you were saying, is that there are so many ways that you can go about tackling a question. For instance, my first thought to this was to think, well, there is a moral basis, yes, but it's interesting that in the New Testament, that in the epistles going out to the Gentile churches largely, and in the book of Acts, you rarely find anything about hell. I mean, you can find some references here and there, but that doesn't seem to be the main message of the teaching of Christianity. And then I could just as well also say, well, the doctrine of hell existed before Christianity did. You can find it in the Jewish writings of the time. So it's not like Christianity came up with this. Christianity just took what was already there from a Jewish worldview. And besides, what's the point of a scare tactic if you don't think the threat can be backed? I mean, it might well be saying, like, Kurt, if you don't go along with what I say, I'm going to pull out my death ray and use it on you. You're not going to be scared of that because you're going to think those don't exist.
Right.
It's that kind of thing.
It's an interesting point you brought up. So there are times when humans use scare tactics for good. So suppose that your neighbor came over to your house and said, I need help. Don't go over to my house. There's a murderer in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure you would have a little fear about going over to your neighbor's house because there's a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question is whether or not there is a murderer. And if there really is a murderer, then the scare tactic is good.
Or we can think of a parent with a small child and saying, don't let go of my hand because there are kidnappers out there. Now, by a probability basis, very few children overall will get kidnapped. Of course, it does happen from time to time, as we saw this week in the news. But it's not like as soon as you let go of your parent's hand, you're going to get kidnapped. But that possibility is out there.
Yeah, let's take maybe a more common example. When a parent tells their child not to put their hand on the stove because it's hot and they'll burn themselves. So that's much more common, right?
Yeah.
So is it bad for the parent to use the scare tactic on their child?
No, not at all.
Of course not. Yeah, that's right.
And this just me just brings home the kind of thing that's being said that I find the atheist arguments to grow weaker and weaker over time. I honestly think the atheist of 50 or 60 years ago would be highly ashamed of the way that atheist apologetics is doing today. They would look at the new atheist and I think and just say, please sit down and be quiet. You're doing our cause great harm.
Yeah, that's probably right. And some scholars out there think that this new atheism movement is a novelty. It's beginning to fade, and they might be right as some of these big voices begin to get older or pass away. In the instance of Christopher Hitchens, they're not multiplying the leaders.
Yeah.
And in fact, some new leaders of what some people have called a neo-new atheism, they're being more down to earth. They're saying, look, we can learn from religion. We can learn, even though they're still atheists, but they're not as anti-religion as the Four Horsemen.
I think you might have met like Alan de Botton, for instance, and that there's even an atheist church showing up in the UK right now.
That's right.
And, there was a news story somewhere recently about the top intellectual thinkers in the world, and number one on the list was Richard Dawkins. And I just couldn't believe that when I read it. I mean, I won't deny Richard Dawkins, I think, is very good when it comes to things like biology and science as science. I thought The Blind Watchmaker, I disagreed with it, but I thought it was a very good read. But when it comes to religion, and he starts talking about that, it becomes a rant. And I liked what someone said, where if Richard Dawkins is the greatest intellectual out there, what does it say if he's afraid to debate William Lane Craig, which he was?
Right, yeah, and there was a rabbi who wrote an article at the Huffington Post. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but Rabbi David Wolf, I think. He wrote this article that people can check out. Just do a quick Google search for, is Richard Dawkins really the world's leading intellectual? And he really takes it to Dawkins for not being the world's greatest leading intellectual.
I think that rabbi was, in fact, one of the speakers at this debate they had in Mexico for one time where Richard Dawkins had some interaction with William Lane Craig. I'm pretty sure the rabbi was there, which to me is a big surprise because I don't really see many Jews doing this kind of apologetics debate, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, when I was thought, this guy is not entirely on my side, but for theism, he is, and I think he's doing a very good job.
Yes. yeah, I mean, it's great when we can find common ground with some people towards a sort of common cause.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to bring other people of other world religions when we can, to use a political term, work across the aisle.
Yeah.
So it's good when we can do that. It can show solidarity on issues, and it speaks to, I think, God's grandeur that other cultures can recognize him. It speaks to the good role, I think, of natural theology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're here with Kurt Jaros. Our call-in number is 714-242-5180. We do have a chat open if you want to go there and ask some questions, something for us to discuss as we're here. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back after this.
Check out CYIWorldwide.com. CYIWorldwide.com. Home of Grok Radio. Free music downloads, advice, prayer, and support. CYIWorldwide.com. Do you grok?
Hey, this is Minister Grok. Thanks for listening. Although Grok Radio is free, there are costs to upkeep the website, podcast, and purchase Bibles and materials for street ministry. And while we are happy to pay this ourselves out of pocket, we will gladly accept any gift if you feel led to support the shows and our street ministry. You can send a gift or love offering through our website at CYIWorldwide.com. Thanks for your support, and God bless.
You know, paying the donation thing gets me to think about something else to talk about with our guest, Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics. Our number is 714-242-5180. But oftentimes on the show, I'll make a statement about how we need your donations and support here at Blog Talk Radio and at Deeper Waters. They really go a long way. And that would include a ministry like Real Clear Apologetics. We all need your support. And it stuns me so often that there are so many ministries out there that are raking in millions of dollars, and ones that I think are particularly harmful ones, such as the Word of Faith movement. I understand Benny Hinn's on a crusade trying to raise millions to get out of debt, and here I'm saying everything, you know, if you just get us, I've said for it, if we had 20,000 listeners, which I understand this station goes out indicated as 20,000, and each one gave $1 a day, we'd be set. Our ministry doesn't cost that much. Neither, I'm sure Kurt's probably doesn't cost much more. It might cost a bit more since he's probably got more professional time and such and traveling a lot more. But really, the Apologetics ministry isn't that much to support, and it's a lasting ministry that is really out there making a difference. Do you find you have the same kind of problem sometimes if people are just not supporting the Apologetics ministry?
Yes. Well, before I speak to that, I want to say, if you've got 20,000 listeners, I would take $1 a year from them.
Yeah.
$1 a day. Yeah, then you might start living like Benny Hinn.
Yeah. If I said $1 a day was a mistake, I said what I usually say is if each listener gave just $1 a year to Deeper Waters, we'd be set. We wouldn't have any trouble. And just imagine with what you can do with getting a cup of coffee, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't drink coffee, and coffee could have gone up for it. Definitely not a Starbucks cup. I'm sure about that. But
that's right. Yeah.
All the things you could do with $1, you can donate it to a ministry like Deeper Waters, and for that you can go to tectonics.org. And you can make a tax-deductible donation to us that way. Just let them know it's for us. Or go to deeperwaters.wordpress.com and make a donation that way. But isn't it a shame, though, that it seems like people like you and I are out there just having to do everything we can to get people to support apologetics, and yet they're being fleeced by ministries like, say, Benny Hinn or Ken Copeland, and all these others out there. It's just such a tragedy.
Yeah, well, it's certainly hard to go up against people who say, send me money and God will bless you. Some people buy into that. But, yeah, like you're saying, it's hard for apologetic ministries to raise financial support. And so I think for now the time being is we all kind of have to be, to use the biblical reference, we've got to be tent makers, right? Paul said he made tents. So we have to do these other things to sustain ourselves for now. Though I've found that if for people who begin to get involved with church ministries, other ministries, say like youth groups, I think pastors begin to see the value of apologetics, and they begin to know you more as a person. I think that can lead to some good possibilities in the future. You might start off as a volunteer, then you might become the youth pastor, or you could start teaching Sunday school classes to the adults. I think this could lead to something like a teaching pastor position, even if it was part-time. I think that would be helpful. But people are, as it's evident for those in apologetic ministries, people are much more open to just giving to their churches and sometimes letting the churches figure out how to donate the money than for themselves to donate the money.
Yeah, but this also needs to be kept in mind because some listeners might have been listening to this show and read my blog and things like that thing. This apologetics ministry really does seem pretty exciting. And what you're saying, Kirk, is also be how anyone could get started doing apologetics. And that's kind of the thing I'd say, too. Just go out there and do something. Try to teach a class at your church. Try to start a book study. Write a blog. Do something. But every one of us in this field, Kurt, myself, and any of the scholars that I have on here, we all started somewhere. None of us was born knowing this knowledge. We had to work for it. We had to study it. We had to earn it. And anyone listening to the show, if they want to really apply themselves, they can make a difference in apologetics.
Yeah, and there are a lot of opportunities, more so now than even 5 years ago. I know there's, with William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith, he's got those different chapters. Aren't you affiliated with a ministry?
Yep, I'm a member of the local chapter of Reasonable Faith, and I'm also a member of a local chapter of Reasons to Believe. And I'm not a science expert by any means, but they have to discuss several topics sometimes, and I try and help out with those. Because I just want to do whatever I can to help out in any ministry.
And isn't there, I think it's pronounced Ratio Christi, is that like the university campus apologetics ministry?
Yeah, and I think people are wondering, how do you wear so many hats here when I'm seeing, because, I'm with Ratio Christi as well, their ministry of issues and answers. Yeah, so I'm JP's ministry partner. I run Deeper Waters. I'm a member of 2 other apologetics groups, and I do Ratio Christi. So, and in fact, I'm hoping to soon get a position teaching apologetics at a local Christian school here, so let my listeners be praying for that one to come through. That'd be a real help. So, I will be very busy in all this, writing a blog 5 days a week, too, and doing this show.
Nick, you are a living testimony to the various ways that people can become involved in apologetics.
I would certainly hope so. There's a story I like to tell people. I've shared it with my wife several times, and I kind of like to throw it out there to let people know to not let anyone hold them back, because back in April, we had several guests on here for Autism Awareness Month. It's not a secret that I'm an Aspie with Asperger's, and so my schooling was paid for by Vocal Rehab at the start, and they found out that I was wanting to go into ministry at Bible college. Now, this time, I didn't know about apologetics yet. I just was going into preaching. And they were telling me, look, you're a smart person. You should really consider something like engineering or something like that. I didn't care about engineering. I'm not against it, but it's just not my thing. And he said, besides, if you go into this field, you are just not going to be able to handle public speaking. And I keep telling people, I wish they could have been there when I did my senior sermon at Bible college, which was to the entire student body, and the faculty, which would be in well over 1,000 people, and handled it just fine. Yeah. So we're talking about with supporting it. You spoke earlier about how things are different in the UK, and that there's still some semblance here in America, which I was kind of wondering about that, because I think most people here in America are biblically illiterate. But if we don't stop the drive the way that it's going right now, and I think we can, I really do, I think we're on the verge of a golden age of apologetics. But let's suppose we let that drop, for instance, that you and I and everyone else just packed up and said, well, that's it, we're going home. Mm-hmm. What would happen to our country within a few years if we did that?
Oh, that is an interesting question. There are vast amounts of possibilities. In the UK, what I witnessed when I was there for a year, a lot of churches were not very populated on Sunday morning, some of them. And this has to do more to do with this idea of like religion versus relationship. You see more conservative churches talk about the relationship, and the religion is kind of more the dead, dying, liberal theology, the instituted denominations, that sort of thing. So what to expect here? Yeah, I think you would expect to see more churches being transformed for things like shops or other worldviews, such as Islam, Muslims taking over churches and making them mosques, temples. So you see some of that. But there are some similarities still, like even with the evangelical churches in the UK, there are still people that are what we would say biblically illiterate. They still struggle to know what the Bible is about or saying on the matter, but they enjoy going. So some of the same criticisms for American Christianity apply over there.
Yeah, it seems to me a lot of times that our churches have by and large become social clubs and self-help groups. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting help with issues, like, for instance, can the church help you overcome alcoholism, or can the church help you through a messy divorce, something like that. Yeah, it can, but what we tend to forget is that we're supposed to offer something that no one else can offer, and that's the gospel. And that the gospel will help you with your problems. Helping you with your problems is not the purpose of the gospel. But we've made the church to be all about application and all about me, without having a firm foundation for it. It's something similar going on in the UK.
That's a tough call. I'm not sure I could say that I've experienced enough of that. Perhaps because there are so few. Here there are many more. But if I could add to that what you were saying, I like to point out the Mormon Church can help you with alcoholism. It can help you with marriage. It can do a lot of things for you. But that's not what the gospel is necessarily about. Like you said, the gospel can help you, but there's more to it than that. And J.P. Holding, who does the Tectonics website, Tectonics Ministries, he's written this excellent blog series over at Real Clear Apologetics on restoring apologetics to evangelism. Because his starting thesis, is that personal testimony as evangelism is, and he uses more provocative language here, he says it's damaging, destructive, and undesirable form of evangelism that we should abandon, because this idea of personal testimony can be more subjective, and it doesn't really address or speak to the truth of how we see Christians evangelizing in the Bible.
Now, to be fair, also, I think he does say elsewhere that he's not totally opposed to it, but it has to be done within a context. For instance,
Right.
you need to give an intellectual backing, and then you can say, and here's the difference Christianity has made in my life. I spoke recently at a little discussion group about inerrancy for some college students at a local college, and there was this one student who was in there, and he said, well, I don't really know all the historical stuff and such. I just tell people about what Jesus has done for me. I said, okay. I give you a picture of a scenario. You're in your dorm, your apartment, whatever. There's a knock on the door, and you open it, and there's these guys, two guys. They're in white shirts, black pants. They got name badges on. They're saying they're Elder X from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they want to talk to you about the Book of Mormon. And they know that the Book of Mormon is from God, because they have a personal testimony from the Holy Spirit via a burning of the bosom that tells them this is from God. And so I said, now why is it that they should accept your personal testimony over theirs, or heck, why should you accept your personal testimony over theirs?
That's right, and and that also, that begs the question of, well, do we make certain decisions about what we believe just based off of our feelings?
Yeah.
I don't check for the burning of the bosom to think that the sun exists.
Yeah. And when we're saying this, I mean, you and I certainly won't deny the difference Christ does make in someone's life. I've told people a number of times that one reason I'm so clear and excited about apologetics, I get passionate about it, is this pretty much saved my life in many ways. I just remember just being so wondering what the purpose of everything was, even as a Christian. And then, lo and behold, I found out, there is a way you can use your mind and use it to serve Christ. And it just really got me going so much. And when I was talking with Lee Strobel last night, I told him, I said, Lee, I got to tell you, your book, Case for Christ, it was the book that lit my fire. It really started me going down the path that I'm on, and I owe it to you greatly. And so we're not denying that Christ can change a life, but I don't think that change comes until you really start to study what all Christ did and who he was. And when you get all that, then your worldview changes, your thinking changes, and then your life changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, it just seems that maybe you found this in churches in your area, that our churches, by and large, skip to personal application of a text immediately. And what I've tried to do first is, when I'm reading text, I like to ask, okay, what does it mean, first off? And if I'm doing the Old Testament, I don't even skip to the question, what does it mean about Jesus? Which is something else we'd like to do. I just want to say, what does it mean? If I was an Israelite living in the time of Moses and reading the book of Leviticus, what would I think it meant? And you have to try and put yourself in another culture, another time. It's very difficult, but it requires work. Now, after you've ascertained that to a degree, then you can say, okay, what does this tell me about Jesus? And you can look at that, and then you can get to, what does the text mean to me today?
Right, or perhaps even better yet than using the word mean for me, because that can come from this more subjective, response to hermeneutic. The more accurate question that, I know you're asking is, how does the text apply to me today?
Yep. Yeah.
How do I live my life in response to the text?
Yep. Usually it seems we can get together with Bible study groups, and if all we're doing is asking, what does the text mean to you today? And no one really
feel?
no one knows how to do the real Bible study behind the text. All we're doing is we're getting people who are sadly ignorant of what the text means and putting that ignorance together and thinking you'll get a good result from mass ignorance together.
Yes, that is one of the problems that we need to look out for.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think we should do to get past this application or thing going on?
Yeah, well, some of it is just slowly working the battles that we are. Like I was saying, how some of the influence of various views of interpreting the text, reader response, that hermeneutical technique and method brings about this, what does it mean for you, this subjective belief, because on that view, they would say, well, we can't know what it meant back then, so, but we've got this text, so what do we do with it? So, it's fighting against issues like that. I think it's important to have hermeneutical discussions and debate within Christianity. There are a lot of pastors out there who can tend to be more liberal, even though they'll try and hide it. The lay people will still be conservative. They still see the text as it is, and they understand its simple message. But more liberal pastors would reject that or modify it. And so it would be important to even be working against pastors that are leading and shepherding people to correct their view. That's one way to do that.
Well, we're here with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Projects. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back after this.
Join Unituber and Army Girl for Christ as they discuss spiritual warfare, spiritual preparedness, the end times, life issues, and personal and spiritual growth. That's www.truthradionet.com, truthradionet.com.
Join Army Girl for Christ and Minister Grok as they tackle some of today's pressing issues from a Christian point of view on Truth Be Told, every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, check out CYIWorldwide.com.
And we're back with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics. I'm Nick Peters, your host. Our number is 714-242-5180. I'm thinking about something you said also about how does it make you feel when we're talking about the text. See, I've had Jehovah's Witnesses visiting me lately, and you might think, God have mercy on them. But it's going very amusingly. And, they've kept realizing they have to watch their language about me, because they'll talk about something from their book, and they'll say, so how do you feel about that? And I can often say something like, maybe sad, maybe encouraged, but I think what you really mean to say is, what do I think about that?
That's right. Yeah.
And
I tend to point that out, even if it's just playfully, to people who do that. I was discussing with a different person online about a certain issue, a political issue. And he asked me what my thoughts were on a matter. And I told him I didn't think about that issue too much, but here was my thought on the matter. And he responded asking a follow-up, why do you feel that way? And so then I replied, and I said, well, I didn't say I felt that way. I said I had a thought about that.
Yeah. And
so it's an important distinction.
What you were talking about pastors, and you said we need to be on the lookout for people who are very liberal in the pastorate, and we are fighting against them. I often find I'm fighting against pastors who are not at all liberal, and the problem is, I think you could almost say they're too conservative, so much they are getting into the kind of fundamentalism that's kind of, like only the Bible and nothing else, about doing any real background study or anything of that sort. And things they teach, I think, can be often disastrous. They're not preparing their flocks. When my wife and I were out searching for churches, I remember we went to one, and there was a guy preaching there. He was a guest pastor, and he had to be about 2 to 3 times my age. And so the text that he goes to is Mark 2 with Jesus healed a paralytic, and how it ends with, we have never seen anything like this in all of Israel. And he makes the whole sermon be about things that he has never seen, which has absolutely nothing to do with a text. So I'm sitting there listening, and my wife's next to me and trying to say, stay calm, stay calm. And even at one point there he starts talking about a friend of his who passed away, and the very next day he said, and that friend now is walking on streets of gold. And I'm saying, like, even if you interpret the book of Revelation that way, to where it really is the literal streets of gold, I can tell you, your friend isn't walking on them right now because the resurrection hasn't happened yet. His body is still there. And I see pastors making that mistake at funerals so many times. It's like the person's died and they're saying they're experiencing the resurrection right now. And that's really a non-Christian way of looking at the world. And the average person in the pew, they don't have a clue that the person who's supposed to be a good shepherd to them is feeding them nonsense and preparing them to be torn apart by wolves.
Yeah, I strongly sympathize with what you said and have experienced much of that myself from various discussions about the role of philosophy and really more simply rational thinking. And using that and interpreting the text. You know, some people say, well, you just got to leave the Bible versus a philosophy. But of course, that person presupposes that their interpretation of what the Bible is saying is the right one. And so not only have I seen this in myself, but I know both of us have been interested, especially because of your father-in-law, his interpretation about a passage in Matthew. You know, he takes to interpret differently. And so he's been accused of not holding to inerrancy, which to me is clearly a missed distinction when he can hold to inerrancy and have a different view of what the text is saying. So it's really, people aren't thinking as analytically as they could be. And some of that is, I think, a cultural failure. You know, in public schools, at least, there's no logic courses. There's no classes that teaching how to people to think critically. If they have like a comprehension class, it's a part of typically an English class. You know, literature comprehension. But that's different than helping people become good thinkers. So and I've seen this with people saying philosophy is different than theology. I once had a Bible professor at a university I went to. He told me there are two ways to interpret the Bible, philosophically or theologically. I couldn't believe that this Bible professor at a Christian university told me this because he clearly didn't understand the role of philosophy or really what philosophy is. And it's saddening to see that. So, but I think we're slowly helping people understand the role and how philosophy is good.
With what you were talking about with my father-in-law, Mike Lacona, and inerrancy, I've been involved in this debate for a while. I mean, when I saw what was going on, and I thought this position that my father-in-law is denying inerrancy, it's nonsense, this needs to be answered, and I wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. I mean, most of you know me know that if someone or something I care about is being attacked, I refuse to sit on the sidelines. And thus far, I don't think any of my challenges have been addressed in this matter, that they need to be. And yes, we are going to be having Mike Lacona on the show sometime in the future. But this whole thing, it led me to see more of the problems going on in the church, because my thought with Mike's view is that, I don't know entirely if his interpretation of Matthew 27 is correct. I'm certainly open to it, but I'm not going to close the door entirely. But instead of just closing the door right at the debate, why don't we just say, if we think the Bible is true in all that it teaches, let's examine the question instead of just throwing it out. Let's study it and see if it's true. To me, that sounds like research worth funding, research worth supporting. But if we try and decide beforehand that our position's right and we're not going to look at the evidence, that speaks more of a position of fear of a text, fear of what study would get us, instead of confidence in the text. And that's, along with what you're talking about with this fear of bringing philosophy or anything else into the text, as if the Bible is not going to withstand it. I'm convinced the Bible can withstand any test whatsoever, so let's bring it.
Yeah, well, and I think what people mean when they say, let's see if it stands up against philosophy, I think what people mean there is they mean, or at least when they're comparing and contrasting the Bible versus philosophy, they mean to say something like philosophy devoid of divine revelation, or philosophy devoid of true premises, because clearly someone can think very philosophically, have true premises, and still be consistent with what the Bible is saying. That the two aren't mutually exclusive. God is the God of philosophy, and He's the God of logic, and we understand these laws of logic, because of Him, and these are consistent with the Scriptures. So I don't see a reason. I think people aren't clear with their language. They're not clear enough with their language when they bring criticisms against philosophy.
In fact, I would say it's not only that someone can do that, I'd say someone must do that. All truth is God's truth, and if you have true premises and you're thinking rationally and you're weighing out the evidence the way it should be, you're not going to contradict Christianity. If Christianity is true, you can't contradict it. It kind of reminded me of something we heard last night talking about irrefutable facts, and I knew what they were talking about, I knew what they were saying, but when you think about it, every fact is irrefutable. If you could refute something, it wouldn't be a fact.
Right. Now, what you said reminded me when you said that if you're operating under true premises, that it would still stand up against the test of the Bible. A friend of mine put this very nicely. He said, if you've got this argument out there, and you believe it's got true premises, but it appears to contradict against a certain biblical interpretation, well, then maybe it's possible that our interpretation of the Scripture is mistaken, and that is what we should be reevaluating, not the argument at that stage. That's important to make, because I think a lot of people in their study of, I think especially, I don't know where you stand on this, Nick, but especially on the Calvinism, Arminianism, or other views debate, I think a lot of people fail to see that.
Well, my view, I think, is generally more Arminian than anything else, but it's a view that I don't really debate too much, because me, the Calvinism, Arminianism debate, it's one of the most annoying debates of all. Unfortunately, I know too many people are usually on the Calvinist side who seem to equate Calvinism with Christianity. And I will say I do have some very, very good friends who are strongly devout Calvinists, and the number of debates we've had on it together is zero, because frankly, we don't care about converting one another. The only secondary issue I really enjoy debating a lot is eschatology, and that's also because I think there are some more serious apologetic implications to eschatology. It is the kind of thing that you have going on. An example of the apologetic implications is we had the Jehovah's Witnesses over, like I've been saying, and we started talking about Matthew 24 last time. We said, well, we think that did have a minor fulfillment in 70 AD, but it was a much larger fulfillment in 1914. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem, all the blood and terror and horror that Josephus described, and that's a minor fulfillment of a text. Especially since I keep saying, he said this would happen within this generation. So, me, that really brings it out a whole lot more, that why this matters. And if I see a position that it doesn't matter too much, I don't really care to debate it. Like, for instance, one reason I'm not a Calvinist is I don't really hold to eternal security, because I've seen too many apostates come forward. And some people say, well, what do you do about assurance of salvation? And I say, I do the exact same thing I'd tell anyone to do. Trust Christ. That's it. As long as you're trusting Christ, I say you're saved. And then you don't really have to worry about matters that much. just do what you're supposed to be doing and trust Christ.
Right. I think most of the issues regarding that theological point is that we're supposed to be confident in God's work.
Yeah.
Like you say, the goal is to trust Christ. That's, I think, what the Bible is certainly teaching on that matter.
And this brings to the point that with debates like this, I mean, you can have too many of us that major in minors and minor in majors. And like I said, I enjoy discussing eschatology. We had Steve Gregg on to discuss preterism early on in this podcast. And but at the same time, I know too many people who do make it too much of a focus. If I did the same thing with preterism, some of my friends would be calling me out on it entirely, because I definitely know you can be a non-preterist and still be a devout Christian. My wife's a dispensationalist, for instance, and if she asks a question about eschatology, she'll ask me and say, what would someone from my position say about this question? And I want to give her the best answer that I can, because I think, I think my view's the correct one, and so I think it'll stand up to scrutiny, but I want to give her view a fair shake and let her know what it really says. And yet, there are so many Christians out there who I think have these charts and graphs about what's going to happen in the book of Revelation, who the Antichrist is, when everything's going to take place. They've got it all mapped out entirely, which that is something I do love when I read dispensation books. It's the flow charts and maps and graphs. Gotta love those. But they have all this mapped out entirely, but when you ask them a question about the doctrine of the Trinity, they don't have a clue whatsoever. And to me, that's the problem. I'd have the same problem if a preterist was in the exact same position. They knew everything about 70 A.D., but they couldn't tell you anything about the Trinity. Yeah.
Now, you had remarked how, for you, the Calvinist Arminian discussions can be annoying.
Yeah. And
certainly that is true. But I do find that there is some strong apologetic implications in this debate. Greg Gansel, he wrote an article, an essay called "Making the Gospel Connection" in "Come Let Us Reason," and so he notes that there are he calls these theological themes where the scope of common grace, the nature of general revelation, the effects of our sinful condition on our reasoning, these are all relevant to how we approach apologetics. And it's interesting because this is really my area of interest in apologetics, at least from an academic standpoint, and that both the Arminian and Calvinist camps affirm this idea of total depravity, inability, whereas there are other views, say like the Eastern Orthodox Church, they don't have that same viewpoint.
Yeah.
So these brings up interesting questions for the role of natural theology and whether or not non-believers can do natural theology, and if there's intrinsic value in presenting arguments to people.
Greg Gansel recently contributed to a volume called God and Evil, and I have read that book, and so that my listeners can know this, we are working also on getting Greg Gansel to be on the show. There's a whole slew of good guests coming up. Yeah, when I'm talking to people now, I say, hey, how would you like to be on the show? I can't do it anytime soon. I say, okay, that's fine. I'm thoroughly booked up to the late summer. Can we get you sometime in the fall? It's just amazing how many people have been coming on, and it's such a joy to get to interact, and it really is something that the church is missing. The church doesn't know this gold mine is out there, and yeah, I still say we are on the verge of a golden age of apologetics.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. There are some indicators that seem to tell us we're heading that way. And yeah, I would like that as much as you would.
And, for my listeners, if you're out there and you're kind of looking at the way the world's going, I tell people the same thing all the time. And so, you know what? I really don't like the way our country is. I don't like the way we are morally, economically, politically, etc., etc. And I say, you want to know whose fault it is? Go look in the mirror. That's whose fault it is. If I expect the world to act like the world. The counteract to that is the church has to be acting like the church. And if the church isn't acting like the church, the world is going to go its own way. And I spoke recently here about how the technology we have is so incredible today. The Apostle Paul would have been thrilled to be able to do what we do today. And we were driving to Atlanta and back recently to visit the in-laws, and you make that drive east there and back 4 hours, there 4 hours back. I mean, imagine how far Paul traveled in 4 hours, and how long it would have taken him to go this distance. And he did more with what he had back then, which was nothing really, compared to what we do with what we have today.
Yeah, that's right. And now I haven't studied eschatology as much as you have. It's not one of my main focuses.
Yeah.
But I've noticed one disadvantage to a certain view, and I won't name the view, but I think one of the disadvantages to the idea that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, that notion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything's going downhill, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
The disadvantage, so this is a practical assessment, is that that approach fosters a mentality that we're not going to succeed, we're not going to win.
Yep.
And so that disincentivizes people from going out and doing what Christ instructed us to do. You know, some people, they think, you know, there's that one song that says, you know, heaven's my home and I'm here on earth just passing through.
Oh gosh.
You know, I'm sure if you've heard that song before, but, you know, we're not just here passing on through. And I think no matter what your eschatology is, I would hope someone would understand that we're here for the new earth, that that Christ is going to come and reign. And so there is work to be done in transforming this planet. And this is our home. We have dual citizenship in both earth and heaven, the eternal kingdom. So we've got valuable work to do. And so, like I was saying, with that one view of eschatology, I think that disincentivizes people from action. And I think, you know, that's just a small practical assessment that I think dings that view.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I'd really like to talk about a little bit more. We're going to take a break and come back. We will talk about it a little bit more. I'm Nick Peters. We're here with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics, and you are listening to the Deeper Waters podcast. We'll be back after this break.
Check out CYIWorldwide.com. CYIWorldwide.com. Home of Grok Radio. Free music downloads, advice, prayer, and support. CYIWorldwide.com. Do you grok? Join Army Girl for Christ and Minister Grok as they tackle some of today's pressing issues from a Christian point of view on Truth Be Told. Every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, check out CYIWorldwide.com.
We're here with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics. I'm Nick Peters. Our call-in number is 714-242-5180. Now, Kurt, you were just talking about this idea that the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and this world isn't our home and such. I've written about this, I'm sure you've seen recently on my blog, with an entry called The Escapist Mentality, where we kind of have this view in our church that, that we've got to get away from all this, and we need to protect ourselves from the world, and it ultimately ends up saying, who cares what happens as long as we're okay? And, you know, I understand people are wanting to go to heaven and be in the presence of Jesus. I want that. You want that. We should all want that. But I look at that and say, yeah, I want that to happen someday, but right now, and yeah, I believe like you that heaven's going to come on earth, essentially. I think that's what you were saying at least. So that's my view. And that's going to be with a divine...
That seems to be what Jesus teaches in terms of how we should pray.
Yeah.
Right?
And,
thy kingdom come.
Yeah. And that means it's ultimately going to be a divine action brings that about. But, you know, I look forward to being in the presence of Jesus, but I keep thinking, you know, when I appear in the presence of Jesus, I don't want to appear empty-handed. I want to be in the presence of Jesus and having done something for him on this earth. And our church, that we're not called to protect ourselves. We're not called to abandon the culture. We're called to engage the culture and transform the culture. And if you look at Matthew 16 with the great confession of faith, and Jesus says, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it." Well, gates are defensive tools in the ancient world, which means hell is supposed to be on the defense from us, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I think we share some sympathies here, though I haven't thought as much about my own view on eschatology, I think, as you have. But I think we share sympathies on at least this view. It seems like you can hold to a number of views but still agree with what's been said here.
Yeah, you probably could, but what you have to realize is exactly what you're saying. The church has great power. I mean, we should read something about we have the gospel. It's the greatest message ever, and we're sitting here saying we've got the greatest message ever, but it's not going to do any good. I mean, how can you believe in the power of the gospel and at the same time say things are hopeless? And to be fair, I'm sure at times we all say it, but our whole lives should be there is hope because of the gospel, because of a resurrection. And I think the danger also of a resurrection is we limit it to Jesus forgives our sins because he rose again. Yeah, we've got forgiveness. That's great. That's important. We have to teach that. But the resurrection is so much more. I tell people the resurrection means Jesus is king of this universe right now. And when you look at this, at the Great Commission, he says, all authority is given to me in heaven and in earth, which means right now he's reigning. He says, now because of this, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. And I've also told people along these lines of, because we sometimes give a question about those who've never heard, and that's an interesting question. I say, all we can say is we're told ultimately, I mean, I think God, the judge of all the earth, will do right, but we're told ultimately, do the Great Commission. The Bible never addresses a question because for the Bible, there's no plan B. You do the Great Commission, that's it, there's no other plan.
Yeah, I agree with much of what you said here.
So, what do you think we can do here in this golden age of apologetics right now? What should our area churches be doing to help everyone out?
Yeah, well, it certainly seems like, I mean, there are a lot of criticisms of the way that we're doing Christianity right now. And oftentimes it's a lot easier to criticize than to offer a better approach. But I think in some ways some churches are trying to get back to the basics, and that's good. But I've also found when churches try to get back to the basics, they also neglect about 1,800 years of Christian history, 1,900 years of Christian history. And so I would encourage people that in our attempt to get back to the basics, some people, they cite what the apostles did. They sold everything they had and made sure that everybody was without need. We definitely need to be doing that. But at the same time, let's not neglect what we can learn from history and from our own Christian heritage.
My own stance is with the selling everything you have and such, and I think that was limited to Jerusalem, but there is still something where it says we have to take care of our own. And I think the reason we have so many problems economically is because the government's doing that job, by and large, and the reason the government's doing it is because the church stopped doing it.
Yeah, that's, again, perhaps we shouldn't go too much into politics, but I would share sympathies with that view. But alternatively, too, if we still go hard and make an active approach to do this, then maybe people would realize, I would rather go to the church for help than the government.
Yeah.
So, and that would then take away this pressing need that some view the need for more government. So, in either way, Christians need to be actively loving people. We need to be involved with our communities and making sure that our neighbors, you know, aka anybody that we come across, is without need. And then we'll be following some of the instructions that Jesus laid out for us to do.
And I'm thinking this whole time about how so many times we can be told that the church just isn't ready, that we need to keep everything simple, and that if you make things too difficult, you're going to drive people away. And part of my thing is that, well, you know, I'd rather have a church with just a dozen people that really know what they believe and why and are dedicated than 1,000 people who are just so-so in it. Because that church with 1 dozen can really change things. I think we saw that take place in the 1st century, after all.
I think churches, both contemporary and classical type, have begun to dumb down the message of the gospel. And I think that's hugely problematic. It waters down the message. To use the analogy that Paul has, it puts people that were once on milk and then on meat back on milk. And we need to be on meat. And people that are new to the church, give them milk. You know, it serves a certain purpose. It's valuable, but there comes a time when you grow and you need to be taking things more deeply.
I've noticed with so many churches that we have ministers of music, you have ministers of administration, you have youth ministers. You know, that's good and fine as far as it is, but I look forward to the day when every church will have an office of minister of apologetics. That even if the pastor can't focus on apologetics, and some of them can't, some of them are very busy, I think the pastor should at least have the basics, but he should have at least 1 or 2 people in the church that are go-to people for when these issues show up.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more of a pressing need and matter. And like I said, some churches don't see that yet, but others do, I think. I think more churches are becoming aware of this need, and hopefully we'll begin to see more like of these official church positions for the role of apologetics in the church.
Yeah, you know, we also helped everyone on an applicational level. Our church, for instance, we had talk about doing volunteer work at the church last Sunday, and we said that the middle schoolers are being taught immediately the importance of sexual purity, which I'm listening and think, great, that's awesome, I think that's wonderful. But at the same time, I want us to be cautious, because we need to show how that purity fits into a larger worldview. Lauren Winner, she wrote the book Real Sex, The Naked Truth About Chastity. Very good book from a Christian perspective. And one thing she said was, if a boy and a girl are spending a date together and they're on the couch in the evening together and they're home alone, a few verses from Paul aren't going to be enough to dissuade them. And I think she is absolutely right entirely. You need to have a whole world view. And when I was dating Allie, I'd go to see her in-laws, and when I took her out, they could trust me with her entirely because they knew I had that world view, I had that backing. Doesn't mean I wasn't tempted. God knows I was tempted. But it meant that I had something else in mind that said, you know what, I'm supposed to wait until marriage, and I'm going to be very glad I did, which I was. And, you know, I was someone who was entirely honorable. Heck, before I proposed to Allie, I called the Laconas and said, hey, I want you to know, here's my plan, here's why I'm doing this. Can I get your blessing on this?
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think every guy should.
Important. We need to be teaching our young people how to live well.
Yeah.
And more than just having a good world view, but having having that world view become action. I think that's key. It's the action, or in this case, inaction.
Yeah. I think part of the problem also, though, with that is, well, we need our young people to be living holy lives. We've sometimes made it that the gospel or Christianity is all about being a good person. And you can be a good person without being a Christian. I don't think you can be a holy person, but you can be a good person. But the gospel isn't about coming to just make us good people to help us get along. It is a whole way of looking at life. It focuses on ethics a lot. Ethics is very important, but it's not about ethics.
Yeah. Yeah, the ethics needs to be informed with right thinking and a right relationship with God. And there's so much to be said on that. You're going to have your own show just on that.
Yeah, and when we start doing this kind of thing, I think we will see a lot of the problems in our country that we have going on disappear. I mean, like what we've been talking about with the marriage debates at the start of the show, I find Christian young people today are so badly prepared for this one. They'll put up the equal signs on their Facebook statuses without having a clue what they're really doing and why. And then you have so many people who just think the only argument against us is the Bible says so. I mean, I've been told that Bill O'Reilly even has repeatedly said this on his show, that the only argument you see from the other side is just Bible thumping, and I'm looking at kind of thinking, have you actually read anything from us? The main arguments I never use the Bible in this debate. It's not really important, because I think this can be established otherwise, and if you just use the Bible, yeah, you get the Bible thumping thing. If someone asks me what the Bible says, I'll tell them what it says, and I'll defend what it says and why. But our youth today, they look at this debate, they don't know what is going on. They don't know what is at stake, because they don't know how the Bible fits in with their whole view, and they're told they need to be a good person, so that means they have to be tolerant and accepting. It's just such nonsense.
Yeah, and to add on to what you said about people that just quote the Bible, it's not as if the biblical authors wrote this stuff arbitrarily.
Yeah.
They had a wisdom. They witnessed this stuff. They recognized this stuff is not the way we should be living. This is not the way that God wants us to live. And so, if our culture is going to decline on this path, I think in 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to look and we're going to witness all of these. There's going to be a host of problems associated with allowing sexual promiscuity and immorality at this vast level. So we're just going to have to learn the hard way instead of first learning and then living.
Hey, are you actually saying that if somehow we lost this whole debate, that within 20 or 30 years it would be known that we actually were on the right side of history?
Yes, that's right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and those are the kind of cliches, though, that are just pulling people away. It's soundbite thinking that's filling our schools, our language today, that you don't really think. You just throw out a quick soundbite and that settles it. Yeah, and there's definitely this broad need to help people think more critically and analytically, to certainly to learn civilly from people who think differently, and I think that's been good for the Christian church. I don't think we've been loving people with homosexual attractions correctly for the past, say, 30, 40 years. And so now, in some ways, it's beginning to bite us in the butt. We're reaping the whirlwind right now. And so right now, we've because we didn't do that the right way, I think we're learning the hard way. And we are learning more about how people with homosexual attractions think, how they feel. And so it's forced us to learn more about that predicament and situation. So in that sense, it's been good, if we can try and look at this in a good perspective. So the job of the church to respond accordingly. And that's where guys like Rob Bell have gone wrong. He's not responding properly. I'd like to focus on something else. You said we can get started here a bit, and we'll have a break soon, then we can talk about some more of we talk about how we need to, give the other side a fair shake and such. And when Lee Strobel was speaking last night, he talked about how he arranged for a debate at his church. And I've seen this debate. I wasn't there, of course, but I heard it later on audio. It was a debate between William Lane Craig and Frank Zindler, which I'm not sure if you've heard that debate, but if you hear it, it's a massacre. And he talked about how this debate was publicized in newspapers. Everyone was talking about radio stations across the country were carrying it. And that when the doors opened, he said, there was a 2-mile gridlock outside the church, and the doors opened, people were running into the church to get seats. And he said, when was the last time you saw people running into a church?
Yeah, no, that's right. People, they want to learn more about these questions pertaining to apologetics. They're interested to see how Christians respond, how atheists can account for certain things. People get excited about this material, and so we've just got to keep at it.
We'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back from this break.
This is Mike Licona. Nick Peters is my son-in-law, and I'm excited to announce his new podcast in which Nick will discuss and have guests on topics related to Christian apologetics and dealing with disabilities. Nick has already interviewed apologetic stars such as Greg Koukl and Rob Bowman, and I know of other stars he's in the process of inviting. So be sure to check out Nick's new podcast.
Hey, this is Minister Grok. Thanks for listening. Although Grok Radio is free, there are costs to upkeep the website, podcast, and purchase Bibles and materials for street ministry. And while we are happy to pay this ourselves out of pocket, we will gladly accept any gift if you feel led to support the shows and our street ministry. You could send a gift or love offering through our website at cyiworldwide.com. Thanks for your support, and God bless.
I'm back here with Kurt Jaros of Real Clear Apologetics. We're on the Deeper Waters podcast. Our call number is 714-242-5180. We've kind of been all over the place today, but I think it's been very enjoyable, and we're into our final segment now. And what we were talking about with the debates being held at churches and such, if churches held these kinds of events more often, I think it would be very beneficial to the church. I mean, they even said that 46 people entered that debate that night as atheists and came out followers of Jesus Christ. And this information, it's out there, it's available, and the problem isn't, churches, it's not for lack of information, it's lack of distribution. Yeah,
that's certainly something that I think a lot of scholars and apologists would say, and that's why, I don't, although I did philosophy as an undergrad, I haven't pursued any philosophy degrees at the graduate level, and so I'm not a philosopher. However, I consider myself an apologist, and I really enjoy this role because part of the role of the apologist, as you know, is to disseminate information from, say, the ivory tower, the higher-ups, the scholars, to the layman, and I really enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun because I'm sure you felt this too. I feel like I'm still learning, and I love to learn and to think about things, and one of the best ways you can learn is to teach people, and so that's really what I enjoy doing.
Well, we found out at the start of the show that we were having some technical difficulties at times, so we might have a little bit more time, we might not. I don't know, because the show usually ends at 5. So just in case, make sure we get things in, because we're going to stay here as long as we can, but just to make sure, Kurt, tell my audience quick if they're interested in what you're doing, because I know you're traveling to the UK, and so that means you can come and go to places if people need you. If people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, where do they go?
Yeah, so they can check out my website, which is realclearapologetics.com. And then there at the website, which I think is very easy to move around at, you can go to the About section and check out the RCA team. They can check out a little bio about myself. But, I've gone around speaking at different places on apologetics. For some, it's been very basic introduction to apologetics. Some people still haven't heard what it is. And so I've laid laid forth a biblical case on what apologetics is and how we see it done in especially the New Testament. And they can check out my website more, and there's various information there from scholars that they can listen to. I've got information from various YouTube accounts, and Mike Lacona's website, he's graciously shared information that I can share over at my website, so people can begin to read articles and then link over to his site, much like what I've done with your blog post.
Yeah.
And people can create their own profile where they can blog. Everybody who signs up, which is free, they get their own blog. So what they can do with that is a number of things. They can just write posts about anything that they may have questions about, that they're thinking through, they want help thinking through, or they can write reviews of other people, from scholars to laymen. If you've taken some issue up with a blog post that someone else at the site has written on, you can kind of do peer review, right, just like how journals are done, but this is done at the blog level. There's this whole blogosphere out there of people, and so it's fun to interact with them and think about things. And also there's forums. People have their own profiles, and you can start private groups and message with each other. And then lastly, you can also check out what my ministry is doing in terms of the grassroots level, speaking engagements. I've just started a couple new features that I'm hoping will take off. There's this Q&A, question and answer, so if anybody has a question, they can go to my site, and if they'd like to see how I might respond to it, they can ask away. And then also, Nick, you've also inspired me. I think sometime this fall I'd like to try and start up a podcast and see how that goes. But I'm still learning about how to do that, and I think it'd be fun to give it a try.
Well, maybe someday then I'll be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, and I'll have to ask you more questions.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to get started Blog Talk Radio because I really don't know much about technology whatsoever. I think it's so amusing for me because people assume when they find out you're an intellectual type of person that you automatically know everything about computers and you've seen every episode of Star Trek out there. None of which applies to me in any sense. But with what you were talking about with blogging, for instance, and this is also directly relevant to apologetics, I think blogging is such a great tool for apologists, and I really think they need to be out there blogging more often. I've even told Mike, Mike, you need to be out there writing some sort of blog. I think it'd really help your followers, your readers, your fans. And every person can write a blog and get it started and get basic information out there about what they believe and why. The internet it's such a great way now to do ministry. You can reach anyone right from your computer, and if you put it up there on a blog, it is there forever. And for some of you, my listeners out there who are older, have their own kids, maybe even their own grandkids at this point, just imagine you can write a post your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren will see someday. It can be a lasting legacy for them as well.
Yeah, and not only is it good for other people to read, but it's good for the author. I found that when I write, I've got to do a bit more research and thinking. I've got to think through my issues, and it opens up myself to gentle reproach. If I haven't thought through something accurately, and I want to be open to that. I want to be open to the possibility that, well, maybe I'm missing something or I'm not looking at something correctly. So for people who don't know how to blog, sometimes even starting up a blog can be really complicated. But for my website, it's pretty simple, and you can check out the blog's homepage if they just go to realclearapologetics.com/blog. And then you can see how to write a post. You can create the free account, and it's pretty simple. I hope that something like this could take off for people who may not want to put so much of an effort in trying to figure out how to set up their own blog.
Well, I my blog, it's also a sub-ministry on theologyweb.com. It's one of our sister sites. And so whenever I write a blog, I post it up there, and we've got a community of atheists there. So you can imagine the kind of feedback I can get every now and then from my blog. And the sad thing is, most of the opponents there, they're so new atheistish that they're not really saying anything. Well, I've put most of them on ignore because I realized if I respond to all of these critics, that's all I'm going to be doing all day long. So leave it to other people to do it. And for some of us in the projects, I think this is very important to do because we're not the only ones out there. And I say, these other batters, right now, I really have better things I can be doing with my time, but other people can be sharpening their swords right here.
Yeah, and it's an important point you make. We have to be discerning on when to interact with someone and when to realize that this isn't fruitful. It's not not worth our time, and it's perhaps more fruitful to focus on the real relationships that we have with our neighbors. So there's a time and place for everything. The scriptures teach us, and it's important to apply that.
Yeah, but with what we have with the blog, and people out there who are listening, the Apostle Paul wrote more with ordinary scribes than a lot of us do today. And yeah, I think that writing is very essential. I find when I start writing, my mind starts working out the issues as I'm writing, and I often get whole new insights when I sit down to write a post. And sometimes it can be very surprising that I'll whip out a post and people will be looking, oh, that is so good, that's great. I'm thinking, I just wrote that, okay? It just came to me somehow. It's a unique position to be in, and you'll find it gets very exciting. I mean, I'm sure you got the same thing. It gets very exciting when you put out some work and you find people are sharing it and talking about it. And it's incredible to be a part of this organization.
Yep. It can be very encouraging to someone to know that even just one person read what you took the time to write, and it perhaps gave them something to reflect on and to think about. And
that's something that the people in the church really need to know, is that people like us out there, even if you can't support us financially, you definitely support us prayerfully, but encouragement goes a long way, because something you find out about ministry is very often it is a thankless job. People don't usually appreciate what their pastors do for them, because there are a lot of good pastors out there, and they don't get the appreciation that they should get. I mean, they shouldn't do this kind of thing to be appreciated, to be liked by everyone and such, but it is important still for us to do what Paul said and encourage one another.
Yes, that's right.
And so people who are listening, they can just go to Real Clear Apologetics. They can find your resources there, and like we've said, they can find Deeper Waters there. We're pleased to be working with them, and they can find you in the UK in a couple of weeks. What are you going to be speaking? Well, I'd ask, but we're getting ready apparently to go off that, so time 10 minutes. 90 seconds left, so Kurt, is there any final message you'd like to leave with our audience?
No, and I think I can quickly address your question. I'll be speaking on doing online apologetics, very much what we've been talking about here.
I was thinking that was the case. So.
Yes, I'll present some reasons for, first, why we should do apologetics, and then providing some practical reasons, very much like what we've been talking about. Nick, thanks for having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and make sure you have me back on soon.
I will try and do that. I'm Nick Peters of Deeper Waters Podcast. Next week, we hope to have Justin Brierly. It won't be a live show. We'll be recorded, but we hope he'll be here to talk about matters further. Until next time, I'm Nick Peters, signing off of the Deeper Waters Podcast.